Natalie, if I jumped off at 1:45, it's just that I have a prep meeting at the moment that a conflict I didn't foresee. So if I can join the end of that meeting for 15 minutes, it would be great.
No problem. All right. Well,
we're on a strict schedule, so
yes, that is very true. We're on a strict schedule.
you immediately come to the point.
That's it.
Exactly. It's going to be an efficient conversation.
That's right. We'll get all our points across, solve the world's problems.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'll say we might as well, I'll wait one more minute and then we can start about a minute early just to have as much time as possible for this discussion, but seeing as the majority of us are here and hopefully Monica will join shortly.
Monica? Any signs of Monica?
No, Daniela, you
sent a reminder, so I hope she is with us soon.
Yes, she should be joining us soon. But in the meantime,
it's 10 o'clock in Northern Macedonia.
No, in any way, I've started the webinar now. We're both live. We're live on Facebook and on YouTube. So we're just going to have some participants start to join. We'll give them maybe a few seconds just to get a good number of people on, and then we can start the discussion so that we can have as much time as possible. All right. Well, I say we're already at 40, so I say we get started already. I'm sure Monica will join momentarily. So first off, good morning and welcome everyone to the first Liberal Breakfast of 2021, co-hosted by the ALDE Party and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. We are very happy to welcome you and our panelists to this morning's discussion about disinformation in elections. Our panel today is moderated by ALDE Party Vice President Annelou van Egmond. We are also joined by Barry Andrews, who is a Renew Europe MEP from Ireland, Monika Zakova, who is a member of LDP North Macedonia, as well as a member of the National Parliament and an EWA alumna. And finally, Vita Anda-Terauda, who is a member of the National Parliament in Latvia and who also sits on the European Affairs Committee. Today, we also have Orla O'Brien joining us this morning as our graphic artist for the event. So please remember that you can ask questions to our panelists either by using the Q&A function if you're joining us here on Zoom, or by using the comment section on either Facebook or YouTube if you're joining us that way. The Q&A portion will take place around the last 20 to 15 minutes of the event. So now before I hand it over to our panel to begin the discussion, I will hand it over to my colleague Jana from FNF to say a few words.
Thank you, Natalie. Yes, good morning, everybody, also from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. I'm really, really happy that we are starting just another year, another series of Liberal Breakfast together with the ALDE Party. This morning, we tried to remember for how long the series has been going on, and our collective memory failed us. So it has to be many, many years. And several of you might remember one or another Liberal Breakfast in the past years. And I invite everybody to join us on this journey also this year. Today, we'll be talking about disinformation, which is a topic that's very close to both of our organizations. We at FNF have been working on this last year, especially as part of the Freedom Fights Fake campaign. So I'm looking very much forward to what our panelists are going to discuss today. Without further ado, I'm not going to take up much more time. I'm going to give it over to Annelou.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think a very, very important topic that we're touching upon today. I'm from the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we're going to have elections in 2 weeks, 3 weeks almost. And obviously, this is on top of our minds presently. But we've seen blatant examples, for instance, in the United States recently. So we have 3 speakers today, as was published also on the website. There's going to be Barry Andrews, who's a member of the European Parliament and a substitute member for the Special Committee on Foreign Interference in all democratic processes in the European Union, including disinformation. And he is from Ireland. He's joined us from Ireland, and he's going to speak first. He's from Fianna Fáil. And then after that, we're going to hear from Vita Anda-Terauda, who is from Latvia, and she's a member of the National Parliament in Latvia and chair of the European Affairs Committee. And she's from Kustība Pār. And then hopefully we will also be joined by Monika Zakova, who I'm pleased to say is an European Women's Academy alumni, and I've met her in that capacity, and she's a member of the National Parliament. She's from North Macedonia, but we haven't seen her yet, but I'm sure she'll join us shortly. The first question I want to toss at our speakers is, how big of a threat is disinformation to democratic elections? And I would like to give the floor to Barry first. We have about 5 minutes each. I'm not going to stopwatch it, but because we are limited in time, I'm going to discipline you at some point. So please, the floor is with you, Andrew.
Yeah, everybody calls me Andrew, but it's actually Barry. I get that all the time.
Barry, excuse me, yeah.
Don't worry. Can I start by saying how excited I was to be invited to a liberal breakfast, understanding that to mean lots of sausage and bacon, and so I was immediately excited about a conservative breakfast being things like croissant and an orange juice. So I thought this is great, but as it turns out, this is just as good. So I'm delighted to be here, and as you say, I'm a substitute member on the INGA committee. And we've had hearings over the last few months, the last 6 months, under the chairmanship of Mr. Glucksmann, Raphael Glucksmann of the S&D. And we've heard from experts across the world, and we've heard from journalists, and we've heard from investigative journalists. And in fact, the INGA mandate has been extended for a further period. So there will be further hearings, and we expect to report sometime in June. Now, what we've discovered is that there is a clear modus operandi, which is to identify divisions in society and to kick through those divisions. And generally, those divisions are around issues like migration, and they are exploited by dark money. They're exploited by right-wing groups. And they're exploited by foreign actors, including state actors. And one of the most prominent of those, of course, is Russia. So here in Ireland, we had a direct experience of this in the Brexit referendum of 2016. And one of the political parties in Northern Ireland, the DUP, was provided with almost £500,000, which it spent on advertisements in Great Britain, not in Northern Ireland. It spent on advertisements on the Brexit referendum supporting exit from the EU in Great Britain, where it doesn't even run any candidates. Now, it was able to hide this money under the provisions of the Good Friday Agreement, because it's very sensitive about where you get your money in Northern Ireland. So it was a loophole. And this £500,000 was spent on ads in the week running up to the referendum. Now, your question is, what is the impact? Does it make a difference? Well, when you add it to the money that was spent by Aaron Banks and the Leave EU group, and you put it beside the other Russian funding of anti-EU and pro-Brexit groups, and bear in mind that the gap between defeat and victory was a mere 3.5%. And that this has shaped the complexion of Irish-British relations and British-EU relations for a generation. I think you have your answer. There is no question of doubt that it had a very significant impact. The disinformation that was circulated, the access to data, and Cambridge Analytica is probably a very good example of that. And the use of Facebook ads in 2016. When you add it together, you get a picture of very significant impact on the outcome of the Brexit referendum. So, but we have to also put beside that this question of getting our own house in order. So if there are divisions in society around immigration, for example, then you have to make sure that those divisions are addressed properly, that we address questions of the integration of new communities, that we don't simply blame malign foreign actors for exposing those differences. So there's two sides to this coin, in my opinion. We can't simply blame external factors. We also have to address internal factors. And I think that's a key part of what we're doing. Obviously, the context for this conversation this morning and on a lot of people's minds are the events that happened in the Capitol on the 6th of January in the United States, and the role of social media, and also in people's minds is the conflict between Facebook and the Australian government that I believe was partially resolved last night, and the Australian government acknowledged, conceded some points on the manner in which designations of social media networks would occur. There is a code proposed in Australian legislation, and that has been amended to allow for a sort of cooling off period before Facebook is designated under the code. So a lot of this question boils down to social media giants. Now, the European Union is very active here, Annalou, and I'll just want to deal with social media, just to look at your EU initiatives. First of all, on the Digital Services Act, which addresses the question of illegal content and the obligations of social media giants to take down illegal content, and creates this idea of gatekeepers. And secondly, on the Digital Markets Act, which addresses the issue of competition. And these are parts of what the European Union's acknowledgement of the seriousness of this issue. And Thierry Breton, Commissioner for the Single Market, wasn't exaggerating, in my opinion, when he said that this goes to the question of the very survival of our democracies, the election interference that's going on. And that is not hyperbole. And if you look at the Freedom House annual report, which lists the danger of autocratic backsliding across the world, there has been a consistent pattern in growth of autocracy across the world for 14 consecutive years. So we all imagined, I suppose, at the end of the 1980s and then in the 1990s, that the triumph of liberal democracy was something we could celebrate and plan for into the future. We became complacent, but it isn't a family heirloom that we hand down from one generation to the next. Liberal democracy needs to be earned afresh by each succeeding generation. And that's why I'm delighted to be part of this group in the European Parliament and part of the European institutions that are at the forefront of that campaign for liberal democracy across the world. So let me stop there, Annalou, before you bring the hammer down on me.
Yeah.
And thank you very much again for the invitation.
Yes, just one question to follow up on that, because obviously we can't be complacent. We have to be aware. We have to address internal issues and not just blame it on external factors. But from looking at it as an interested civilian, one of the things that strike me is that the issues that actually these misinformation campaigns run around don't seem to have anything to do with the actual issue. What they want is create chaos, and you never know what the topic is going to be that people are going to rally around to, and where people are going to abuse this. So how can we be prepared? What is sort of the linking pin between all these different issues, be it the US elections or Brexit or let's say a referendum on the Ukraine like we had in the Netherlands? What is the common ground there?
Yeah, I think the common ground, Annalou, is preparedness and awareness. When the 2017 French presidential election occurred, I think that Macron's people were very well aware of the threat that was going to come. And when it did come, it was able to alert media that what was coming through as disinformation at that time was exactly that, and to cut off the threats and to deal with them one by one. So the French authorities were able to prepare appropriately, but it is also about having appropriate legislation in place and it has to be within an EU framework, Annalou, because if we have each member state with its own discrete response to this issue, you create an asymmetry, and of course, it opens up opportunities for not only social media giants to avail of regulatory arbitrage, but also you have weaknesses then throughout the EU member states that can be exploited. So I think it's a case of preparedness, I think it's a case of awareness, and I think it's a case of EU framework being a solution here.
Yeah, thank you. I would think that one of the more cynical results of all this is that all these nationalist movements actually can cooperate globally. But that might be something that we will touch upon later. Let's go to Vita. Vita, I would also love to hear what your ideas are on this idea of how big of a threat disinformation is to democratic elections. Please, I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is my first liberal breakfast, and happy to be invited. Disinformation in Latvia is not new. We have been living next to Russia forever and have been subject to disinformation coming from Russia to Latvia, both targeted at Latvia, and we also have to find ways to deal with the fact that a significant number of our population, as we say, lives in the Russian information space. That means that they don't even need to be targeted in Latvia. We do have a part of the population that lives on the information directly from Kremlin-controlled channels. The same information being fed to Russian citizens does have a great reach here in Latvia as well. And I think it's what we see and have seen for years and years is a failed state narrative coming. Anything that happens in Latvia gets exploded into something that will prove that the Latvian state is failing and it used to be better in the past in the Soviet Union. We see a lot of stoking of divisions in society. And here I have to agree with Barry that this is both a problem, but it's also a failure of our own to deal with a lot of the issues in our society. And if in the past we've seen a lot of stoking of divisions along ethnic lines between Russians and Latvians, today we see different types of divisions. And one of the big ones in Latvia right now is liberal versus conservative around LGBT issues, abortion issues, the Istanbul Convention, women's rights. This is something that's being stoked right now. We also see, as Annalou said, we don't always predict where things are going, what issues are going to pop up. For example, when we had a beef up of NATO troops stationed here in Latvia, we saw a very clear anti-NATO rhetoric coming through. When we had the Little Green Men invasion in Ukraine, we saw a lot of issues being stoked in Latvia, trying to get kind of a separatist vibe going in some parts of Latvia that are heavily Russian. Fortunately for us, that failed. In general, what we see is a sowing of doubt about the veracity of anything. And that is especially problematic right now with the COVID-19 vaccines. Talking to people, there's a lot of distrust of the vaccines and unwillingness to vaccinate. Some sentiments among the older Russian-speaking population of saying, you know, it's all fine and good, but we'll wait for the Sputnik vaccine to come. That's the only good one. And this comes from their consumption of Russian-based information. What do? We have a lot of experience of trying to do things. I think it has implications for our elections in many ways. We have a very stringent regime of advertising, how political advertising is allowed, monetary limits, all of that to keep influences in check. What we have now is we have finally started to use some of the things already in our legislation and in line with European legislation, and that is to actually monitor and take measures against the Russian TV channels. And right now we have the situation where we no longer have Russian channels on the air in Latvia for two reasons. First, a number of them were hit by argument that the ultimate beneficiary of the companies that give the licenses for these channels in Latvia, these individuals are on the EU sanctions list. And our regulator proved the chain to ultimate beneficiary and took them out of the broadcast environment in Latvia. And the second one is a case of multiple violations of hate speech and incitement to violence against Rossiya RTR, which has them banned for 1 year in Latvia now. So that's for our disinformation environment. This has been a big change. We'll now see if that has any impact per se in Latvia. We're hoping it does, but it's a very open question as to what's going to happen to the audiences that have used this. Part of them will continue to use these channels because of the internet and availability, but another part, the older individuals, will probably try to find something else easily accessible at the click of a TV or a turn of the radio. This is the disinformation coming from abroad. That's the main thing we feel in Latvia. It is not, however, the only thing. We, as everybody else in Europe, have a rising populist wave. This was very much seen in the last elections, where the largest party that got a win in elections is the party purporting to represent the Russian speakers. The second largest was a new startup populist party. Fortunately for us, the rest of the parties got enough that they were able to put together a coalition without the Russian party and de facto taking the populists into government, but taming them and watching them fall apart over the last 2 years. They have split into 4 different pieces, which means that in the general view of impacting politics, they've lost all of their impact. But we see the populists using the same types of disinformation, especially the two tools that they have, stoking divisions and sowing doubt. These two things we do have coming through very much. It is much harder to deal with the internal than the external. And it is very much a matter of not dealing with them directly, but dealing with the issues that they're exploiting and trying to get everybody aware of what is happening, and also taking steps to make sure that these divisions do not grow in Latvia, to address the concerns that are legitimate concerns under all of the rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. And Vita, there's a discussion in many European countries whether they should either keep them or maybe encapsulate them. I don't think there's one argument, or there's not one set of rules, but what everybody almost agrees on is that you have to be at least very careful to not work on the normalization of these populist groups. Is that something also that that you are aware of in Latvia, that this is still extremist and that it should never be considered like middle of the road form of political debate?
There is, I would say, the majority has an awareness like this, but there are parts of the populist sector that you cannot stop. or censor. For example, we have some of the more extreme populists from this populist party have broken off into their own little splinter group. And their basic modus operandi is Facebook, social media, and using the parliamentary platform, which means for us in every single parliamentary session, they're live broadcast over the country. Of course, not a huge audience, but it's still live time. Every single issue for debate, we have these individuals debating and using this platform to spout very extremist views. And there's not much that can be done. I mean, our speaker is has a very great challenge to stop them every time there's a violation of code of conduct or rules of ethics. But for the most part, it's a free platform, and we all have to suffer through it, basically. With the social media, there's, of course, all sorts of things that can be done. Mostly it's fact checking and these kinds of operations that we also have quite a number of because of disinformation, huge thing coming from Russia. We have set up a lot of these types of activities.
But there's another dilemma, I think, in this topic is that either you have it out in the open and then it's very graphic and you might reach people who otherwise wouldn't have gone through the trouble of going into the deep dives of the internet. But on the other hand, if this is the kind of debate you have, not in public view, but like on Telegram or on other dark corners of the internet, then you also don't know what's going on. So yeah, this is quite a dilemma as well. I would like actually to now go over to Monica. Hello, Monica. Welcome in this liberal breakfast. You're from North Macedonia, LDP. Actually, North Macedonia is one of the last countries I visited before the lockdown. So very fond memories of that final trip, actually. And also obviously great to meet in a European Women's Academy in London. That's very much where my heart within the ALDE lies. And you're a member of the National Parliament. And also I would like to put this question to you, the threat of disinformation to democratic elections as far as you are concerned. Please, you'll have the floor.
Firstly, thank you for the invitation. I'm participating for the first time of this kind of event on Liberal Breakfast. As you know, the Liberal Democrats in the Macedonian Parliament are part of the coalition with the Social Democrats, and we had it election this summer in August. As a party, we are not directly a subject of fake information during the campaign because we went on a coalition list. But the most problem with the disinformation during the elections are detected that are coming from the Hungarian businessmen, which are financing disinformations here in North Macedonia. Because as you know, the previous prime minister, which was a leader of the biggest opposition party, he had asylum in Hungary, so most of the disinformations are coming from there. We're also facing with a problem with fake social media accounts, which are placing. They're transforming the statements that we are giving for the medias. The most, a lot of this, disinformations are coming for nationalist questions, like we have now the bilateral issue. And also, as Vita mentioned, now is very actual and very popular, the COVID vaccines. Also here, the audience have perception that the best vaccine are coming from Russia. And they are not believing in these vaccines that are coming from the COVAX system. I don't know why we still, maybe the media are building that kind of information, that the most good one is Sputnik. So we have the same problem as Vita mentioned. We don't have like some kind of legislation for controlling the whole information that are coming. Especially the main problem is with the social medias and internet media portals, which are not having registered sources. So the people couldn't, they are placing the information, but people could not know the main sources from which this information is coming. But the government, the previous year, adopted a strategy for fighting with disinformation and fake news in Macedonia. But it's still very hard to deal it with all the things that are coming. Most of the nationalist accounts are trying to increase the European skepticism, using the bilateral issue that became with Bulgaria. So most of the statements and the media space is abused for this kind of disinformation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that overview of the situation in North Macedonia presently. What I would like now is probably to have a few of your ideas on a number of issues that we have prepared, and then after that we will give the floor to people. There's already people putting questions up in the chat function, so we will be coming to those in a bit. But what I would want to touch upon is sort of an interesting question. It almost has to do with psychology, I would think. Why is it that disinformation it goes viral so easily, and that factual information is so difficult to it's so much easier for people almost to believe disinformation, and then the facts are not as likely to be considered the truth. What is the sort of the appeal of disinformation? Do any of you have any ideas on that?
Well, when we have some internet media portal which is presenting some disinformation, they usually use a very attractive topic. So most of the people are opening to read it, and it's like the first information that is in their heads. So then it's very difficult to face them with the facts, because what the audience firstly having in their perception is very difficult then to.
So it's timing. Yeah. Barry, do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Monica's right. I think that mentioned that in my opening comments, that I think that disinformation targets those divisions in society, but also and I think one of the chat questions was about the more sensationalist approach. They deal with the more sensationalist, they appeal to people's feelings, whereas we as parliamentarians would try to be rational and logical. To touch on your psychological question, and we need to be smarter about being passionate about the things that we feel passionate about. And the great speeches over the last century, we remember 2 or 3 sentences about them. That's all. We remember phrases that moved the era, that put the dictionary into battle for liberal democracy. And it shouldn't be beyond our capability to find those phrases from time to time that, inspire young people particularly, that look, yes, the green issues are existential for everybody, but liberal democracy is at stake, and young people should be inspired by that threat. And we have to be passionate. We have to meet that emotional appeal of sensationalism with our own passion, essentially, and not be overly logical. And it sounds like we're dumbing things down, but you're not. You're trying to get a balance right between substance and communication. Now, there are other issues that, around the algorithms that social media platforms use. Their business model monetizes coming back and staying on, and there is something within the Digital Markets Act, one hopes, that will address those issues, which are fundamental. So that would be just the point I'd make, Annalu, to that question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then that populist movements actually need misinformation, or could we envision a populist statement that is actually based on facts, and that we, do these things go hand in hand? What do you think, Vita?
I mean, I think the populist approach is very much what Barry was talking about, how to be very passionate and emotional, how to pick controversial or divisive topics, and how to generate passion around them. Can it be done with fact-based? I think it can, but I think it's much more difficult, because a fact-based, it constrains your ability to make big, grand, flamboyant claims or statements. It's much more difficult.
Boring.
Yeah, once you're constrained by facts, you cannot be as flamboyant as one who is not constrained by facts. I mean, this is the whole philosophy of clickbait. It is the algorithms that continue to amplify whatever it was that you were interested in, and amplify it in a more sensationalist direction often. So, I mean, to me, the work on the digital services and the possibility to actually take on how algorithms create these echo chambers or rabbit holes people go into, I think that has tremendous potential in getting us back to a more normal public conversation. But it's not easy, and I think we'll still have a lot of difficult debates about how that can be done, because it is the business model that most of the platforms are based on, their proprietary algorithms.
Yeah. That's obviously another issue, that this is actually not just corrupting our political system, but it's also something that you can use to make a lot of money. That makes it quite cynical, obviously. And also, I guess that was one of the examples that Monica gave, that the original sort of startup was that people were actually feeling sort of that business opportunities were taken away from them, and they were then sort of translating that into political debate and into populist movement. But basically what they're fending for was of course, the corrupt system that they were benefiting from before this coalition came into government. Somehow they are capable of spreading misinformation, and the people who listen to them don't realize that they are actually just trying to create business opportunities. Or is that something that is actually openly discussed, Monica, in North Macedonia?
We're finding a ways to put this on monitoring, but we still don't have how to say, concrete measures how to deal with it. You cannot control
Is there something that the EU do for you, or sort of could you copy something, or are there
the general Okay, the general issue that with the business model is that we are having businessmen from foreign countries that are financing here misinformations or disinformations, which are putting credits on the populists. So maybe EU should find some way to adopt some resolution or legislation to make monitoring on these channels of financing tools that are coming from one country to another. Because
okay, let me put that there. Is that something, Barry, that we are on the verge of offering also to countries who are within Europe, but maybe not within the EU yet?
I just missed some of that, Annalou. So were you asking me that question? I'm sorry, would you mind just repeating the question?
Yeah, well, what we were discussing is that in North Macedonia, they are now trying to implement legislation and come up with tools to sort of expose these financial links between business people who are actually sort of exploiting the misinformation campaigns to basically secure their own business opportunities. So to expose these financial links, be it for political reasons or business reasons, is there something that the EU can do or maybe already has developed that we can hand over as a tool to North Macedonia and other countries who are willing to
I think
work?
the problem, as I see it, Annalou, is that every member state of the European Union has a different electoral system and different points of entry, different cultures. And it would be dangerous, I think, to assign a specific model of election financing at European level. It's one of the things that I think wouldn't be appropriate at for a European framework. Nevertheless, there are good examples in member states that could be useful for North Macedonia. In Ireland, we are at a very far end of the scale where businesses helping with election campaigns is almost non-existent. And at the other end, let's say the United States, which is an outrageously difficult situation that needs to be looked at. I mean, super PACs, the way they use the back door to fund American elections is outrageous. And of course, Russia and the whole approach by Russia is, look, yes, we're a slightly dysfunctional society here in Russia, but look at the rest of them. And the entire disinformation campaign from Russia is based on that idea. Let's just show that everywhere else is rubbish. And therefore, there's no alternative to the way that you are ruled here in Russia. Democracy doesn't have any attractions. Liberalism doesn't have any attractions. That's the way it's approached. So I think I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all solution to financing. It's such a range, and it depends very much on the culture, the tradition, the electoral system. I mean, we have a PR, STV, multi-seat constituency. It's really complicated. I still don't understand it after 5 elections. And then there are list systems and in different parts of the EU. So.
Okay. Let me go to some of the questions that are being asked on the Q&A. Henrik Vester says we have been talking about extreme right-wing political movements, but isn't there also a threat coming from extreme left-wing political movements?
Yes.
Well, I'll jump in there because I need to go move. I mentioned at the beginning that I have another meeting at 1:15, and I do want to address this question because in Ireland we don't have a right-wing party that appeals to anti-migrant sentiment that is influential, but we do have a populist left-wing party that does appeal to national sentiment, in my opinion, and uses trolls on Twitter, and it has attracted funding from overseas. So we're very conscious of that, and the far left in Ireland are completely blind to the misdemeanors of the Russian government. For example, in Syria, for example, the poisoning of Navalny. They turn a blind eye to the poisoning of Mr. Skripal in Salisbury. So it's a very malign influence, in my opinion. But I think the right-wing threat is of much greater proportions in Europe as a whole. So we do have to acknowledge it, but let's not lose the proportionality of it, Anna-Lu.
Can I add also on this? Yeah. We have like the right wing, but we now have also extremely left-wing party, which is called Levica. So they also have unknown sources of financing in the country. They're also placing informations which are against NATO or the nationalistic issues. And when you have when you're placing informations on nationalistic topics, like which are increasing the patriotism inside the people, then you cannot deal with them very easily, even if you're having facts, because people's emotions are on a high level when these topics are on the table.
I might jump off if that's okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Vita,
so-
I beg your pardon. I'm just going to jump off, and thank you very much to everybody. Thank you, Monica and Anna-Lu, if you don't mind.
That's perfectly okay, Barry. We have a couple of more minutes, but you're excused.
Thank you, Anna-Lu.
Thank you.
You're very kind. Cheerio.
Maybe this is a good idea also to come up with another question, and I'd like Vita's point of view about that. Philip Benyon from the UK points out that maybe we shouldn't spend so much energy on actually debating or fighting the populace, but we should spend more time and energy on putting forward our own issues and our own points of view, and don't even try to sort of get into debates or arguments with people who are not basing their views on the facts. How do you feel about that, Vita? Can we just ignore it and stick to our own message, or do we actually need to oppose it?
I think we can't ignore it altogether, but I do think the right strategy is to look at what are the issues that are driving the populism and address those issues. Because, I mean, I think here in Latvia, we see this whole kind of big political debate about how between austerity versus a more social, inclusive, state-driven social policy. And we have the populists, of course, on the side of more benefits, more support, more everything for everyone. To hell with the budget. Sorry about that word. And this is a big debate, and it's part of the what underlies a lot of the populist success is their ability to point out that government only supports business, not individuals. Look at the COVID crisis, look at the amount of money that has gone into propping up companies, zero support for individuals. And this is what needs to be addressed, is the issue of what kind of support is available, how can you communicate it properly to people so they both take advantage of it and understand what's going on. So I think you do have to engage with the issues the populists throw up. I personally prefer not to engage with the populists directly, but to look more into the issues and try and offer solutions or policy changes that address the issues.
Yeah. And Monica, how do you, in North Macedonia, do you actually address every issue the populists throw at you, or do you just react to a number of issues, or do you stick to your own storyline?
We are trying to use the TV channels and social media channels to act of what nationalists or populists are saying or addressing to us. And we also have the space in the parliament to face with them and to address the facts against their sayings or speeches. But in Macedonia, we still have like bipolarization. You have the social democrats and the populists, which are having the most space in the media. And as a liberals, it's very difficult to address our statements and values on the issues that they are addressing to each other. So, for example, if we have as liberals some kind of statement which is with placing our liberal values, or it is neutral, we have from one part we have the social democrats that are using this statement because we are in a coalition with them, and in other part we have also the right-wing parties or the opposition now, like the populists, which are using in their connotations. So most of the time the statements which are coming from us as liberals are abused from the biggest parties in Macedonia for their political points.
Okay. Let me go to a question. Christian from Stockholm, or Stockholm is his family name, or he lives in Stockholm, who knows, asked, and he says, well, it seems a bit dangerous to reduce the discussion to all those technological issues like algorithms and clickbait, and that we should also, or even more so, look at the human factor that drives people into the arms of populists. Now I can see for legislators, I can see the appeal of trying to deal with the technical issues, because they are much more open to legislation than human behavior is. But he might have a point, actually, that you can change as many technical issues as you want, but if people are still open to the ideas, that there's not a lot you can do. Vita, how do you feel about that?
I think sticking only to technical solutions is it will not be effective. I think the technical solutions are necessary, but they are definitely not enough. I think what we have been talking about is dealing with the issues around which populists create divisiveness. I think learning how to be more compelling and emotional from the liberal point of view is also something that many politicians need to learn, myself included. I think it's also about media literacy, and somebody in one of the chats or the questions mentioned the issue of how is an individual able to handle complexity, and that extremism appeals to those who cannot handle complexity, and that is an education system issue. But these are both the media literacy and the education system issues, those are very, very long-term solutions that need to be done, but will not help us in the next 10, 15 years.
But then how is it that younger people who are generally more computer savvy also fall for the ideas of populists? Monica, I mean, you being the younger of us, how come that it seems that populist movements are not only sort of effective in groups that might not be as computer savvy, but also with young people who should know better, one would think?
In our country, they are still attractive for the young people because of the national questions that they are speaking about. But also now the extremely left-wing parties becoming a very popular for the young people, because they're speaking topics that you'd want to hear, maybe, and because they are disappointed from the whole bipolarization system that we have during the years. So most of the young people are using only the social media informations. So if you have a lot of money to pay on the internet media portals and to placing informations in the social media, you will be very attractive for the youth, because they are only reading this news. They are not checking the sources and the news which are going on the TV stations. And the populists are very good on the social medias, because they have more voters than us. So they're making also a lot of accounts and just spreading the information. So we don't have so much power as liberals to monitor all of these channels and to spread our informations.
Okay, well, that's sad, but it also brings it sort of back to where Barry started with dark money and lots of it. I will have to go at this point, so I would like to give the floor now to Natalie and Jana, who can sort of wrap all this up with you. It was my pleasure hosting this breakfast, and I hope to see you again. Natalie, Jana, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anna Lou. We very much appreciate you taking the time to moderate this event this morning. So yes, as you said to Barry, who are also free to go, obviously it's quite a busy morning for everyone. So we thank you for taking the time to join us today. So yes, we still have maybe about 5 more minutes. So I think this would probably be a good time to maybe do some concluding thoughts based on the conversation. So if Monica, if you have any kind of concluding thoughts you want to give to the discussion, especially on any questions that have been asked by our audience, there's been quite a few of them. So really looking at, the importance of discussing this issue, how we can work as policymakers to make sure that we're protecting our democratic institutions and our elections as best as we can, and also educating the general population on how we can fight this together. So yes, any concluding thoughts? I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I don't know, maybe we need to make more campaigns to raise the awareness of the people, especially of the young people, to read more and to check more the informations that are coming from each media channel.
Absolutely. Vita, do you have any kind of concluding thoughts that you'd like to share?
Just 2 comments. In the questions, it was asked about the public reaction to the Russian channels being off the air. There have been a few remarks about censorship. One of the best ones was apparently in Mr. Borrell's visit to Moscow, this issue was raised. But because most of the channels are off the air because of the EU sanctions list, it takes it out of the area of censorship. So that I think is, it's a good thing for us that there's a clear-cut legal reason. And I also still wanted to make a final comment to something Barry said. And he said that the real threat from disinformation is more on the right than the left. I think that varies very much country to country in the European Union. Our traditional threat has always been on the left through the Russian disinformation efforts. But notwithstanding that, we do have a domestic rise of the right with their own disinformation. But the weight of the matter is still very much on the left in Latvia. And I'm sure it's very different in other European countries.
No, absolutely. I think that just points to the general importance of making sure that people are aware that this isn't only, a type of QAnon type of threat that we see here in the European Union, it's really coming from all sides. And it's a European-wide issue, but we also need to look at, the more individual contexts. And I think that's probably one of the best ways that we can try and come together as the European Union to fight disinformation and the threats that it poses to Europe and also to our elections and to democracy. So to
Can
wrap,
I make one more comment before you wrap up?
Please do.
In the chat, there was a question about how do we get points across when the media are owned by populists. I think that brings up one very big issue that we did not discuss this morning, and that is the question of how does high quality, good professional standards media survive today? They're being hit from all sides. And the less we have real information, the more people rely on the other information out there, whether it's disinformation, poorly sourced social media, all these other issues. So it's very much a question of the future of the media business model in Europe.
No,
I don't know how is in the European countries, but here in North Macedonia, there is not so strict regulation of who can open a media portal. So each one that has an idea to open some portal and to blast informations could do this. So it's very difficult to make monitoring of who is having a media portal and to make monitoring on the sources and the news that is spreading it.
Very much so. No, I completely agree. So within our kind of last minute here, I do just want to bring attention to what Orla O'Brien has been creating for us this morning. So what I'm going to do now, I'll first off, thank you, Vita, and thank you, Monica, so much for joining. And then also thank you to Annalu and to Barry for joining us earlier. Obviously, very busy morning. So, but first, I just want to highlight Orla's screen here. So this is very much a wonderful overview of our discussion. Obviously, we touched on so many topics, and like Vita mentioned, we didn't even get to touch on all of the topics that we could have spoken about this morning. It's such it's so vast. There's so many different subcategories that we can touch upon. So I think this was really much a great opportunity to start off our Liberal Breakfast series with FNF for 2021. This is definitely not the last event or discussion we can ever have on disinformation. It's obviously more important than ever to continue these types of discussions. So first off, thank you to all of our panelists who joined us this morning. Thank you to everyone who joined either by joining us here on Zoom or joining us on Facebook or YouTube where we were live streaming. And again, thank you to Orla for taking the time this morning to draw this wonderful recording of our conversation. So a recording of our event will be sent around. Yana also showed in the chat right here, there's a recording available on Facebook for anyone who wants to revisit the event. And this graphic will be sent around in the recap email to everyone. So I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their Tuesday, and we look forward to welcoming everyone at our next Liberal Breakfast very, very soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.